Good evening. This is Pastor G introducing Basically Biblical. It is May 29th, 2020, and it is approximately 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'm broadcasting from the wonderful Sunshine State of Florida. Welcome. This first episode is an introduction, a little bit about what basically biblical is, and a little bit about myself. So let's begin. Basically biblical is a concept of sort of an open Bible study that I wanted to present. I would like to involve you, the audience, and so from every episode that airs live. That's right, we'll be airing live every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but every Friday at approximately 8 to 8:30 p.m. I will present to you the preview. And tonight's preview basically is the introduction. So, basically biblical is a platform where I will present those issues that have been most prevalent, whether in current events or in past times, from both my service as a pastor and a pastoral psychotherapist. I will bring, hopefully, some new insights, maybe, on many topics ranging from: is there a God? Who is God? What is God? And where is God? Um, and then other things that pertain directly to, our lives. How do we function as children of God? How do we deal with life's events and also be an ambassador for what we believe in? And speaking of what we believe in, I want to be clear that I am a Christian, that is, I am a follower of Christ, that I believe in the Bible, and that the Bible is the inspired word of God. And having said that, that means, you know, if we look at all the resources that we have in our lives, Bibles, um, dictionaries, encyclopedias, and nowadays, the internet and Wikipedia, and all of these sources that we go to for information. I ask the question, how can we rely on those resources which have only been developed in our recent history and not believe in the Word of God, which has spanned 2,000 plus years in history with, yes, there have been a few changes, and we can argue about whether those changes have been correct or not, or biblical or not, or even political, or any other agendas that are out there. But if we believe that God has inspired the words, then we have to be able to wrap our minds around the fact that what is in the Bible is presented, of course, by humans, and all of the people who translated the Bible, who wrote all of the many transcripts and documents that have contributed to the Bible. Sure, they could have made an error here or there. And of course, there weren't any punctuations. So where we see punctuations in the Bible today, they were put there for our benefit, not for the original writers. And so the text is, I would suggest that the text not be looked at as how do I want to say, not to be looked at as grammatically correct, perhaps, or syntactically correct, but be looked at as if you were someone that God had inspired to write down his words, and you were writing those words down right now in the context of all that we have experienced, even over the last 48 hours in our world. How would you write those words? Clearly, we know that the inspired word of God, the scriptures as we have them, are not the perhaps actual words of God. Clearly, they were written by his prophets, and in some cases, we have the actual words of Jesus. But if you were writing down what God was telling you right now, wouldn't you use the words that you are familiar with today? Wouldn't you use examples from life as you see it today in your effort to convey the meaning of what God was expressing to you, or perhaps trying to explain a vision that you saw? So, given that context, is it really that hard to believe that the words of God, the inspired words of God, the messages, the stories that are in the Bible aren't what they purport to be? I mean, who among us has a book, even a letter, or a poem that we wrote 30 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago? When you went back to that poem, that story, that sentence, would you now want to rewrite it to make it sound better, to bring it up to date? Would you maybe have new thoughts about what you originally wrote, and you might want to rewrite it to make it sound better? How many of us haven't written something to which a week, 2 days, an hour, even 5 minutes after hitting that send button, you didn't want to stop that email, retract that message, and rewrite it? Think of that. And yet, we have a text, not just one text, I understand, a text that is compiled of many texts, but a text nonetheless that reflects the inspired word of God through his prophets and his Son, Jesus the Messiah, that has withstood the test of time and the scrutiny of many, many researchers, archaeologists, and the like, examining, scrutinizing, tearing apart, tearing down, and in many cases building up. But it has lasted. Do you have a letter from your great, 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 great grandfather? If you do, would their words be written in today's language? Or would they have been written in the context of where they were? So I think you get my point. I believe that the Word of God is true. I believe that we can accept the inspiration of all of those prophets who, let's just face it, were much more wise than we are. And I think that it will help us, I think, to understand the context and the historical perspective that those writers were writing in. Many of the examples in the Bible are agriculturally based. Today, perhaps, if we were being inspired of God, maybe it would be more technology based. Maybe it would be in the form of an internet, or perhaps like this podcast. So anyway, yeah. So I believe in the Word of God, and I believe that it is the inspired Word of God, and I believe that it is in its form the most accurate that we have. I have personally over 20 different versions of the Bible. And yes, I have yeah, I know. I'm a geek, but I have read all of them, looking for potential places where there would be these errors and conflicts, and so many people who talk about the conflicts and even within the word. Oh, they say that this doesn't match this and this doesn't match that. And okay, so if you were rewriting, say, Star Wars movie, would you write it differently than maybe your neighbor or your children? So, my point being that after looking at all of those versions and studying the word for many years, uh, ultimately, if you are really reading the Bible, I mean, really, reading a sentence and slowly digesting what it's saying, in essence, and throughout hundreds of years, the words are ultimately the same. The essence is the same. When I was studying a few law classes, the professors would say, well, here's what the law says in black and white.